should now be live. So, hello. Perfect timing, Sam. Hello everyone watching out there. This is the Superkick Mania Pro Wrestling Podcast. My name is David Postansky, and I am joined by Samuel George.
Hello everyone.
Hello. So, we're going to be talking about all things professional wrestling today. And if you have any comments or if you want to ask any questions or anything, by all means, if you're watching it on Facebook or YouTube or wherever, put it into the comments and, we'll answer. But I think like the big thing which caused the necessity of the subject today is that yesterday in the pro wrestling world, the WWE released something like 25-30 employees, including lots and lots of the wrestlers. It was an awful lot. Do you have a list with you, Sam?
Yeah, I've written them all down here.
Okay, do you want to run through some of them just whilst I bring up a list myself?
Yeah, no worries. So there's a few sort of bigger names, so the ones like Drake Maverick, Kurt Hawkins, Gallows and Anderson have both been released as well. EC3, Leo Rush was a bit of a surprise for me.
Yeah.
Both of the Canellises, Mike and Maria, as well as Primo and Epico, No Way Jose, Rusev, some quite big names on the list as well who are now released from the company.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, first of all, like the obvious thing of why this has happened, like this isn't the first time WWE have just released a bunch of people at once, but I think this is the largest collection of people all gone with some very surprising names, but it's going to be because of the whole coronavirus lockdown thing. Why do you think they've released so many at this time, Sam?
I can only assume that it's a financial thing. I've read somewhere that some of the names on the list have also been furloughed, so I think that not all of them have been released as such. But I think it's one of those things of financially they have to make some sort of cutbacks, especially with obviously going live every week with still the Raw, SmackDown, and NXT without any crowds, so they're not making any ticket sales or anything like that. So financially, it does make a lot of sense. For a lot of the names as well, I think it's sort of a bit of a long time coming as well. The people like Kurt Hawkins, Zack Ryder was another one that has gone as well. EC3,
yeah.
People that Eric Young, the people they've not used for a while, at some point were probably going to go, and it's probably just kick-started it a little bit.
Yeah, I completely agree. One of the other thoughts I had is, obviously, if they're continuing the live shows as they are at the Performance Centre, if some of these wrestlers are out of the state, or if, Rockstar Spud, so Drake Maverick, he's English. I don't know where he is in the world. He's probably living in America because he's got an American wife. But for all we know, some of these people, Finlay, they might be back home. Lance Storm might be back in Canada. So if it's that, well, you're not going to get here for, weeks or months anyway, we're going to release you and then we might hire you back later.
Yeah, potentially. Obviously, there is always that hope, especially with some of the names. There's the hope that they would bring them back at some point. But obviously, we just don't know. And for some people, I think, so Rusev, potentially there was the thought that he was requesting a release anyway. So
yeah, okay. So if we look at the positives on here, of which there are a couple, some of these guys definitely wanted out of their contract. So it was only about a week ago that they announced that the Revival had been released, and they were trying to get out of their contracts anyway. The rumour is that Rusev had also requested its release. I hadn't heard that EC3 had, but he's come out since saying that, well, now he feels freer, or however he phrased it. So for some of these guys, this is probably a relief.
Especially, for the names, like EC3, who away from WWE made such a big name for himself, but then sort of built himself up again a little bit in NXT to then just not be used on the main roster. For people like that, it probably does make a lot of sense for them, and it could potentially be a big positive for them going further forward.
Who would you say is the biggest surprise to see released?
Gallows and Anderson.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that they're going, because obviously they've been quite a big thing in the OC with AJ Styles. They've just had, they were part of the program with The Undertaker at WrestleMania, which is being labelled as one of the best matches at WrestleMania. So
yeah, and it main evented. It main evented the first night of Mania. This is probably the quickest that, even though they weren't officially named as being in the match, they were obviously a big part of that match. It's probably the quickest someone who's ever main evented WrestleMania has then been released by the company.
Yeah, definitely. definitely. I can't think of any names like that recently, unless of course they were already going on to retire. You know, people like Stone Cold,
Sure,
Goldberg,
sure.
Brock Lesnar when they were all leaving. You know, they had their last match at Mania and then went on from there. But never, I don't remember any names being released straight after WrestleMania from such a high point.
Yeah, yeah. Is there anyone else that's like? I agree. Leo Rush was a surprise. Obviously, he was a big part of things with Bobby Lashley a while back now, and it looked like he may have been in some hot water with the WWE. But then he'd seem to, make a comeback, find his groove, as it were. With
the
the
cruiserweight champion.
yeah, absolutely.
He came back very quickly. 2 or 3 matches in, became cruiserweight champion. He then lost it, and obviously it moved on from there. But I think he was still in contention to go back for a title match once all of this was over. So that really surprised me.
So one of the things that, like, only really through reading this or something that I'd seen, they're having like an interim cruiserweight champion tournament or something at the moment, aren't they?
Yeah.
Do you know much about that? Just because I don't know the full deal there.
I don't know exactly what it is. I think it's because Jordan Devlin competes on NXT UK. And he's the cruiserweight champion, so he can't defend it on both brands. So I don't know if NXT UK is continuing throughout all of this.
I don't think they are. I've not heard that they are. So
okay, so yeah, it'll be down to the fact that he can't then defend the championship because obviously he would still be in the UK at the moment. I would assume he can't then get to America because of all the travel restrictions. So they're having an interim cruiserweight champion. Drake Maverick is still a part of that tournament, even though he's been released.
Yeah.
Quite strange.
It'll be interesting though. I think because he put out quite like an emotional video where he looked physically gutted about it. I think that video is going to have partly done him good and partly done him harm. So the good, I think it will do that because obviously, like when I checked it this morning, it'd been viewed 2 million times. They can't suddenly go back and because he's announced it himself. Oh, they said I could be part of it. They can't really take him out of it. But for any wrestler who's like instantly done a video like that, I think that would have, like under usual circumstances, got them into problems.
Yeah, I think the other thing about it was he constantly mentioned about how fortunate he is. You know, he's fortunate to still be in the tournament. He's fortunate to have been in the position that he's been in before. He wasn't particularly negative about it. He was just sort of very obviously upset and devastated about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so if we go through these now, Sam, like one by one, and say if we've got like a couple of thoughts about each one of where we think they'll end up, if they'll end up back in a WWE in, a few weeks, few months, whenever this coronavirus thing is more under control. If we think they'll end up somewhere else or stuff like this. But we'll start with Drake. Where do you think Drake's future lies?
It's a tricky one with him because obviously he's not been a major part of WWE since he came there. He was the 205 Live general manager.
Yeah.
And then he was the AOP manager.
Then he had the whole run with the 24/7 championship.
Yeah, he had a little run with that, but it was never really used particularly excessively on TV. So I don't know. The fact that the video he's put on Twitter has got over 2 million views obviously shows that he has a following. So whether he'll go on to sort of the indie scene or anything in either America or UK, obviously there could be a potential. He could come to NXT UK once all of this is over. Obviously, he is a British wrestler.
Yeah.
I think he had quite a lot of success in TNA as well. So.
He was, so that's where he made a name for himself. They did British Boot Camp, which was basically their version of Tough Enough, or like the original version of NXT, where it was to find the next TNA star. And I think he won the first ever British Boot Camp. And then when you hear about him back, like behind the scenes, backstage stuff, it's that he's incredibly knowledgeable and, he's an asset to the business. The only thing that's ever said that's a shame is that he's such a small guy that, his future was never going to be long term as a main player, as an active wrestler. But when you heard that, these are going to be my last matches, it sounded like he was talking in terms of this is going to be my last matches ever in this tournament. I don't think it will be. And certainly, even if he doesn't wrestle again, I think he'll end up either back with Impact Wrestling. I think AEW would probably take him just because he's someone that's... I've never heard anyone say anything negative about his character. and it seems like he knows wrestling and loves wrestling and would be an asset to the business.
Yeah, definitely. Even if maybe if he's so knowledgeable about the business, then maybe he goes into another company as someone backstage, and he can help out in that way as well. There's obviously that potential in the future.
Yeah. Okay, so Kurt Hawkins is next. We might need to tag Zack Ryder and Kurt Hawkins somewhat together, because obviously they've been a tag team going back years ago. They've been a tag team over the last year and a half, and they do a podcast together based on wrestling action figures. Did you know that, Sam?
I didn't know about that. No, I know
Yep.
that years ago Zack Ryder actually rebuilt his credibility by doing online stuff, and then he got more popularity and then became US champion out of nowhere.
Yeah. See, and that's the interesting thing with Zack Ryder, is he created a championship belt, and it was like the internet champion, and it got like his hairdo on it and stuff. So it wasn't just like the internet champion and someone else could win it. It was very much a Zack Ryder belt, like $1 million championship is just for the $1 million man. And he was like the first YouTube star from WWE. And then he actually closed down the channel or something, because WWE sort of said, like, you can't have your own thing, and he was very disheartened. But then they sort of changed the rules or the way they view that a little bit, and so then they had him doing his own thing. And yeah, he is a massive wrestling figure collector, and supposedly along with Kurt Hawkins. And I think it's called the Elite Major Brothers Podcast or something like this. I don't really know. And yeah, they've been doing that for a while, so I'm sure they'll still continue that one way or another. And I don't know. Where do you think they would end up, if anywhere, or are they just going to wait until... I think Zack Ryder has a better chance of getting a job back with WWE than Kurt Hawkins at this stage.
Yeah, well, obviously Zack Ryder's been there continuously for however many years now, possibly even over a decade he's been there now, without leaving. Obviously Kurt Hawkins went away and then he came back again. I thought the way they used him when he came back was a little bit strange. So if they do bring him back, I hope they sort of don't go down that route again. But,
was that just a losing streak?
Well, no, what it was, he came back and it felt like they were building him up a lot. And, they had like all these vignettes and it was all very strange. And then I felt like when I was watching it, it felt like at first they were very serious. And then all of a sudden it became like these weird little facts about him that, it was like, he can make toast in 30 seconds flat or something like that. It was weird little facts about him. And then he came back and had this enormous losing streak. And it was like, what was the point in this massive build-up? I was really confused by it when I first saw it.
Well, yeah, and one of the other anecdotes about the whole losing streak is it wasn't that they planned for him to have a losing streak. It was a coincidence that at one point they said he was going to win when he had lost 98 times in a row or something, and he actually had to go and tell them, it's like, no, you can't make me win. All I've got is this losing streak. And it would seem they weren't even aware that they had just put him on a losing streak. They had just never given him a win.
That's not something I knew about, but yeah, it did seem very strange when they brought him back and they had him do that. I thought as a tag team they were pretty cool though, because they went on while Kurt Hawkins was still on the losing streak. They won, I think it might have been WrestleMania pre-show last year, where they just won the tag team championships out of nowhere.
Was it on the pre-show?
I'm pretty sure it was a pre-show match.
Oh, that's a shame, because I do remember that's the story where I think it was that Kurt Hawkins had never had a win or hadn't had a win in however long, and Zack Ryder's like, well, we should be a tag team again, and because we used to be a tag team, and we're going to get you on a winning streak, and then they not just won, but they won the tag team titles.
Yeah, but obviously, if he was still on his losing streak, that means that they didn't win to become number one contenders. Just out of nowhere, WrestleMania weekend, they became the number one contenders for the championships.
Yeah, I can't quite remember that, but I can't remember why would you get, if they've got such a losing streak, why do they get a tag team title shot?
I don't know, it was very strange, but then that was his big moment of ending the losing streak, was becoming a tag team champion with Zack Ryder.
Yeah. Okay, just 1 second, I'm just going to make sure that we got the audio coming through.
It'd be awkward if we don't, and everyone's just heard me.
Okay, just 1 second, I'm just going to make sure... Okay, so, yeah, I hope so. Are we hearing you, Sam?
I hope we're hearing me.
I don't know, to be honest. If not, I'm recording this anyway, so I can bring up the full thing. We should have checked this earlier, to be fair. Okay.
It'd be great if we've done a podcast of mime, wouldn't it?
Yeah, in mimed podcast. Okay, so I can definitely hear you now. You may have been a little bit quiet, but I can definitely hear you now. So,
Okay, no worries.
oh dear. Well, we live and learn, Sam. We live and learn. So, in case you've only heard me or only heard Sam or not heard either of us, we're talking about all of the releases that WWE have done recently. So, we've spoken about where Drake Maverick may or may not end up, and we think that he's probably going to find his way into continuing in the business. And Kurt Hawkins, we don't have quite as much confidence in, but Zack Ryder has a better chance of ending up back at WWE somewhere down the line. Next, we've got, again, club these two together. Club, no pun intended, but we have Carl Anderson and Luke Gallows. What's your thoughts on their prospects?
As I say, that was the biggest surprise for me. I think of all of the people on the list, they've probably got the best chance of going straight to another company. I believe they've got a bit of a history with the Young Bucks from New Japan when they were all there. So there's obviously the easy potential that they'd go to AEW.
Yeah.
They could even go back to Japan. It depends on obviously how settled they are there. But I think that they won't struggle too much once all of this is over. I think they'll go straight back into a relatively big company.
Well, yeah. So obviously they were members of the Bullet Club in the past, and the Young Bucks were as well. And I think they were in slightly different eras of the Bullet Club, but there may have been like overlap. But there is the relationship there, and I think a few months ago, just because I think they only recently signed like 5-year deals with WWE, that the rumor was that because they had been being used so badly, that they would leave and probably end up in AEW. And I think, one, the security of WWE, or perhaps that's a joke term to even suggest that now, but also just the connection with AJ Styles, because AJ and Anderson and Gallows, they all came into WWE at the same time. I think that AJ Styles probably had a lot of input and swing to make sure that they were a unit. But when it's come down to it, they've been released. So I don't know what AJ will make of that.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. Obviously, AJ Styles is a massive singles competitor anyway. He went a long time without Gallows and Anderson. So obviously his booking won't change, I wouldn't have thought, much because of this. I wouldn't have thought he'd be too happy about it because obviously they go back a long way. I think they're all like genuinely really good friends backstage as well. So I wouldn't have thought that AJ Styles would be too happy about it at all.
Yeah, I completely agree. And also, just from AJ's character, I think he'd be someone that would say something or just let it be known that he isn't happy that they've been treated that way. It's been rumoured that the most recent contract AJ signed, he'd planned to be his last one anyway. So whether or not he finishes up with WWE or sees the bigger picture and think, well, people come and go from companies, and that he isn't going to allow it to cause any burnt bridges for himself, obviously. It'll be interesting to see if this could ruffle any feathers with anyone else still in WWE. But let's see who else we've got. EC3. We've touched on EC3 earlier. Obviously, EC3 has been a complete non-player on the main roster in WWE. When he was in WWE years ago, I can't even remember. What did he used to be called? Do you remember?
Derek Bateman.
Oh my gosh, yeah. He was fired or released or quit or whatever in the past because he was a non-entity back then. He went and made a name for himself in Impact, TNA, and came back to NXT where, he was built up enough.
Pretty good. I remember watching him when he came back to NXT, and I think he only really had one rivalry with the Velveteen Dream. And then they all of a sudden brought him up to the main roster. And I remember at the time thinking it was a bit of a strange decision. I thought he probably could have done a lot more, maybe won a championship on NXT first before he came back. But yeah, it didn't really make a lot of sense. And then as soon as they started bringing these people, because he came up around the same time as I think Heavy Machinery and people like that.
Yeah.
And all he was used for was like these little things he was doing backstage where he was posing to a mirror or something like that. And straight away you just thought, they're not going to use him. Okay, never mind.
As a slight segue, who would you say has come from NXT that's actually been used either well or been used the best? Who has graduated NXT and actually really made it?
It's a difficult one. Obviously, the Wyatt family were all started out on NXT.
True.
Bray Wyatt has obviously done very well. Braun Strowman was very briefly in NXT before he moved on to the main roster with the Wyatt family. Obviously, you've got Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins.
Were they in
Big
NXT?
E. Yeah, Seth Rollins was the first NXT champion.
Oh, of course he was. Of course, yeah.
And then they came up with the man formerly known as Dean Ambrose as the Shield. They were from NXT.
But look how far back in time that is now. Like, even though NXT's only however many years that they've been doing it, but you have to go back to the very early days. Like, in the last 3, 4, 5 years, you think when Finn Balor came across, won the Universal Championship in his debut, got injured, and they've never really pushed him to the point that he's now ended up back in NXT.
Yeah, he has. Yeah, there's a few different people going back to NXT as well. Tyler Breeze did it with Fandango.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple more as well that have
obviously Charlotte Flair. If you look to the women's roster, it's actually a lot clearer who's made it.
Yeah, definitely. You know, you've got the big three who main evented a WrestleMania. Didn't quite main event a WrestleMania, but they were close to it in Charlotte, Becky Lynch, and Sasha Banks.
Yeah.
Obviously Bayley as well, because I think they made a 4 horsewomen thing.
They
did as well. So yes, so those 4 on the women's side have obviously done very well for themselves. But it doesn't seem to be loads and loads. Hopefully that will change in the not too distant future with people like Aleister Black and Ricochet.
But
the Viking Raiders.
Yeah, when you think of Aleister Black and Ricochet, when they made their debut on the main roster, it's just like, we're going to bring in some new faces, and they didn't have any plan for them. So even though like talent will shine through, they could have had real momentum coming in, and with both of those guys, they didn't. Yeah,
definitely. You know, I was reading a thing this morning about who would be next in line to challenge Drew McIntyre.
Yeah.
And, you know, you had the obvious names. You had, like, AJ Styles, Seth Rollins, Kevin Owens was on the list. And one of them was Aleister Black, but they said he's not ready yet. It'll take about 18 months until they feel he'll be able to be pushed enough to be ready for a World Championship match.
Yeah. Which is interesting, because he was the other person rumoured to win the Royal Rumble when McIntyre won it.
Yeah, I think Aleister Black's incredible. I've been watching him since just after he made his debut in NXT. So I watched him build. He had a massive feud with the Velveteen Dream, which I think may have won some awards down in NXT as well. I can't remember specifically. But then he also won the NXT Championship. Him and Ricochet, I think, won the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic as well.
Mm-hmm.
Or it might have been the Viking Raiders and they got to the final. But
sure.
Like him and Ricochet were a big tag team together when they first came up to the main roster. I think Aleister Black's incredible. He's one of my favourite wrestlers at the moment. And it seems strange that he's going to have to wait probably quite a while to be put into the main event scene. Yeah.
So we will see how that develops. I don't think it's going to take 18 months, though. I think just depending what happens, obviously, with stuff going on in the world, I think he's going to get at least some sort of main event by the end of this year. But anyway, let's go back through the list. So next up, we've got Eric Young.
Yep.
Back to Impact Wrestling, I guess, is his best bet.
Yeah, quite possibly. Obviously, that's where he made his name before he came to WWE. Eric Young's a massive shame in WWE because I really enjoyed Sanity when they first came into NXT. They were tag team champions for a while down there. Came up to the main roster and just disappeared. It was unbelievable how quickly they disappeared when they came up.
Yeah.
Impact is probably the best bet. But you can kind of almost liken Eric Young to a bit like an Austin Aries sort of character where he came to WWE, didn't do as much as he wanted to, and so went back. And I think Austin Aries is quite a big player in Impact Wrestling now.
Gosh, I don't think he is. Is he in Impact? Is Austin Aries currently in Impact? He's like the guy that he's got a reputation. He kind of falls out with everyone. And I think he might be in Major League Wrestling most recently.
Maybe.
Austin Aries, he was world champion in Impact about a year and a half ago. And John Morrison, when he was in Impact as Johnny Impact, challenged him for the World Championship at their equivalent to WrestleMania, Bound for Glory. And as soon as Morrison won, he pinning Austin Aries, who was the world champion. Austin Aries just like stood up, no sold the end, walked out, flipped off the management, and kind of quit at the main. So when we talk about people leaving immediately after main events or something, I think Austin Aries kind of burnt a bridge with Impact doing that at the time.
Wow.
Yeah,
I didn't know about that. I'm not a massive Impact watcher, so I may be quite behind on the times there.
Yeah, no worries. So I think he's in Major League Wrestling, or was most recently, but he kind of falls out with people everywhere he goes. Okay, but let's have a look. So we've spoken a little bit about Lio Rush. Where do we think Leo's going to end up?
Well, he's got quite a typical sort of almost lucha style about him, so he could maybe go down to Mexico,
Could do
some sort of like lucha libre stuff there, which would be pretty cool. Yeah, or obviously the other big companies, AEW, Impact, he could go to any of those. To be honest, anywhere on the indies, I think Lio Rush would kind of fit in wherever he went, and he would go pretty well wherever else. So I wouldn't be too worried about him.
Yeah, okay, so I could certainly... I don't know if he... It just depends, I suppose, for the wrestler if they want to go and wrestle in Mexico, because it's obviously different country, different culture, perhaps. Mm. But whether or not he'd end up in AEW, it might just depend who else they're hiring, because they've got a lot of like athletic guys. Obviously, he's got a good look about him. He could end up in Impact, but he might. I can kind of see that Lio Rush might hold out to get back either to WWE or AEW rather than Impact. Some of these guys could end up in NWA, which we haven't really mentioned about. But I'm not sure what's going on with them at the moment either. I think they're completely on hiatus. Okay. Next up, we've got Heath Slater. So the last non-world champion from the three-man band, and actually the leader of 3MB.
Yeah.
But when you think about it, Jinder Mahal got fired. He came back, won a world championship. Drew McIntyre was fired, came back, won a world championship. Maybe that is the missing ingredient. You know, he had to go through being fired before he can get into like ridiculous shape and come back and get a Universal World title.
You never know. There's never anything in wrestling that is written in the stars. But I probably wouldn't go down the same route with Heath Slater, just because he's been so underused. He was the first SmackDown Tag Team Champion, and then
was he actually?
Yeah, him and Rhino.
Oh wow!
So what it was when that was the thing when they were doing the brand split.
Okay, yeah, I remember this.
So he was like just this unused person who just sat in the back on his own.
Yeah.
Because he wasn't picked by either brand. He had this big thing where he was trying to get anyone to sign him. So like he challenged Brock Lesnar. And then that's when Jinder Mahal made his return as well. And he came back and he was like, "This is my buddy Jinder Mahal. He's going to help me." And then Jinder Mahal turned on him and got himself a contract. And then they had the SmackDown Tag Team Championship tournament where him and Rhino came together as a team. And they won the tournament, and so he became a champion and won a contract. But ever since then, has just not really been used at all, I don't think. Yeah. He's one of the ones, when I said earlier about it being a bit of a long time coming, that's probably the epitome of that statement. Yeah,
see, and the thing is, I always liked Heath Slater. When you go back to, again, the original version of NXT, because he was part of like the Nexus with Daniel Bryan for that brief period there before he got fired. And then obviously Wade Barrett and whoever else was in it.
David Otunga, Justin Gabriel.
Yeah, Justin Gabriel.
Michael McGillicuddy, who's now Curtis Axel.
Yeah.
Even Bray Wyatt, when he was Husky Harris, was in that.
But wasn't he part of like the second wave?
Yeah, they added a couple more members soon after. But they also... Who else was in there? I just thought of someone else then. I forgot. Darren Young was in there.
Yes. So Darren Young... and Ryback.
Ryback, that's what I was thinking of as well, yeah.
Okay, so yeah. So yeah, it's like... The thing was, during the original NXT, he seemed like he'd got more charisma than some of them. Like, better on the mic, more personality. He was always a little bit, like... He was all right in the ring, but nothing stood out, nothing spectacular. But who knows? If they were ever going to bring him back in a few. Say he got into like ridiculous shape now, they could bring him back to challenge Drew McIntyre just in a one-off main event somewhere or semi-main event, and they could do that if they want to use it.
Super Showdown thing just to get it out of the way.
Yeah, Super Showdown. That's it. Okay, who have we got next? Sarah Logan. I was quite surprised by that.
Yeah, a little bit of a surprise there. Again, not really one that's been used all that much since the Riot Squad disbanded. Obviously, she was in the Elimination Chamber, I think.
Yeah.
But then as soon as Shayna Baszler came in, got demolished. So, yeah, it was one of those ones where it's a bit of a surprise because she's got a lot of potential. She's married to whichever one of the Viking Raiders it is as well. So they sort of they split those two up.
I know. So that brings up an interesting point, just with like a couple of these that we'll get to as we go along. But there are a few instances of that along the way. But yeah, I was surprised that she was gone, just because a lot of the women's roster they haven't used to their full potential anyway. And I'm trying to look. Are there any other? There's one or two other female wrestlers that have been released, but it was just like, why her out of everyone? I don't know. Okay, let's have a look. Eric Rowan. So over the last year, had a huge storyline with Roman Reigns. Then he had a mechanical spider, and now he's released. Will he just go and join Brody Lee?
I don't know. I'm not 100% sure he fits into the Dark Order, to be honest.
Do you know what? There might be an opportunity if they were to, whoever the Dark Order are feuding with, which, to be honest, isn't very clear. But whoever the Dark Order are feuding with, they could almost bring in Rowan as someone to infiltrate them, where it looks like that there is some other mystery person who we all know is going to be Eric Rowan under a different name. And then when he turns up, he could turn on Brody Lee, and they could have a little bit of a feud there and do something else. I don't know. But
yeah, I know. I'm pretty sure they had some matches in WWE between the two of them, so there's obviously natural chemistry there already. So yeah, I couldn't see it not working. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, like, so the most interesting thing is, like, out of the Wyatt family, Eric Rowan, until they pushed him last year, to me, he always seemed like the most obvious one that would get fired at some point, because they never used him. It always did seem like, as he is now, Brody Lee was, like, perhaps the better in the ring, more of, like, the leader character out of those two, at least. Obviously, both of them under Bray, and for the short time that Strowman was there, he seemed like the big, heavy, tough guy one. So it was always like that Eric Rowan was like the afterthought of the Wyatts. Yeah,
and he was always the one putting people over as well. He was the one that lost to The Rock in that fastest ever WrestleMania match.
Yeah.
It was always, he was the one who took the fall. It always.
Okay, so is that a highlight of his career, or was that a low point of his career? Because he, like, Bray Wyatt didn't get a match with The Rock, even though it was like, you stood right there, you could have had a match at Mania with The Rock. But instead, Eric Rowan did, but it was over in 5 seconds. So does he feel like, wow, I wrestled The Rock, or was it like, I was the one sacrificed for this?
Yeah, I think it would be more a sacrifice sort of thing. Everyone always talks about the big WrestleMania moments, and that's kind of one of those ones where, yeah, The Rock had a moment, and everyone remembers The Rock. A lot of people maybe don't even remember that it was Eric Rowan that lost that match. But I wouldn't have thought that it's one of those things that you would look back on too fondly.
No. Okay, so next up we've got Epico and Primo, the clones, Carlito's brothers, aren't they?
Yeah, I think brother and cousin maybe.
Okay.
His family, to say.
Yeah, they're the clones along with Carlito Colon. They were never ever used. These are, and it's not that they were bad. They weren't, in my opinion, I didn't rate them massively high, but they weren't ever bad. They were just never ever used. I can't remember a single feud they had.
No, I mean, there was a time when Carlito and Primo were a tag team. I think they may have won the tag team championships, but
quite
I could
possibly.
be way off there.
But after Carlito left and then Epico came in. Yeah,
the only time I can think that they were sort of potentially making a name for themselves was when they came back as Los Matadores.
Yeah,
and they had El Torito, but obviously they weren't Primo and Epico there. But yeah, that's the only time I can think that they actually sort of nearly made a name for themselves, and I think they may have competed for the championships when they were in those characters. But then they came back, and then there was a draft where they got moved to SmackDown. They had this big impactful moment where they attacked people after a match. and then they announced that they were there on SmackDown, and then they were never really seen again.
I don't know why they do it in WWE, because they devalue their own people. So when we're talking that they're doing this as a cost-cutting measure, like so much of like the talent that they've even got, they sort of devalue and make them worthless themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, there's plenty of examples of that. Even down to the fact that Rusev's most recent feud with Bobby Lashley.
Yeah,
it was just one of these ones. It felt very sort of almost playground-esque because it was all over a girl, and you know, she'd gone to Bobby Lashley. They then got married. Rusev jumped out of a cake, and it was kind of like just it never worked, and it never really seemed like it was ever gonna.
Okay, we may as well we'll jump back, just going by the list that I've got, but we'll come straight to Rusev now. Like, it was one of those things. They did the same with the Revival, where they had the Revival like shaving each other's backs and stuff like this, where they kind of punish people on television, where it's like, well, we'll humiliate you, and they lose the value. So it's like, we're going to devalue you on your way out if we think you want to leave. Yep. But then it's going to tell so many people not to stay, or that, wow, I see that this is the path I'm going down. I just want to get out of here quickly. I mean, there was no positive for Rusev in the feud with Bobby Lashley. It was that his wife left him, cheated on him, and went to another guy. And you can't get the revenge on the wife. You might be able to do something to make her look silly, like pour something over her, jump out of a cake, and make her, you know, cry or upset or something. But there was no way that Rusev, as the face in that situation, because he can't win the girl back, because it's like it wouldn't have made him look good.
No, exactly. There's no way for him to be shown with any value in that situation.
Yeah. But Rusev, surely he's just going to end up in All Elite Wrestling, and probably, I think if he went to All Elite Wrestling, he'll be in a world title picture quite quickly.
I would hope so. If he does go to somewhere like that, I would maybe hope that they're able to bring back something like the Rusev Day gimmick that he had, because it just worked so well. Maybe him, because Aiden English has been one of the people that's been either released or furloughed recently as well. Maybe the two of them could get back together and reform that, because that was like one of the moments where like everyone that I spoke to about it really thought that he was going to be pushed, and they just never did it.
Okay, so obviously his name isn't really Rusev or Alexander Rusev. I'm just looking up because I noticed on Twitter, since this happened yesterday, he's like changed his name back to a version of his real name. So his real name is Myroslav Barniashev. So he's Bulgarian. And obviously Barniashev ends in the ev, like Rusev. But Myro, Rusev, it's 2 syllables. So it could just be Myro Day.
Yeah.
And you can imagine, so I don't know if like, this may predate you ever so slightly, but when Jericho first debuted in WWE, it was in 1999. And for a couple of months at least, they were putting up these little vignettes which just had like a clock counting down, and it said countdown.
I vaguely know about this, yeah.
Yeah, countdown to the millennium. And then it was like July or August, where it was something like the millennium is here, and it had the countdown which Jericho's often used since. And it was like the millennium is here, and it was Chris Jericho. I think they could do
interrupted The Rock, didn't they?
Yeah, he did. And even then, actually, just as we're talking, how they devalue someone, they did a 2-month build-up for Jericho, for him to come in, interrupt The Rock, and then they put him in a feud with Road Dogg Jesse James, and it took him from debuting in 1999, coming into a main event 1 week only feud with The Rock. It then took him until, I think, 2001 to win a world championship. And it's like, strike whilst the iron's hot. Why don't they ever do that?
Wasn't that a thing as well that they did with Chris Jericho, where he won the championship from Triple H and then was forced to give it back?
Yes.
Was that around that time as well?
that was a few months later. He, on an episode of Raw, and they've done this a few times over the years, where someone will win a world title, and perhaps they do it just to test to see the crowd reaction, but then they say for some reason it doesn't count. And so before he eventually won it, Chris Benoit had won a world title, I think defeating The Rock, and then they reversed the decision, even though if you got like the clip of it, there was just Benoit holding up the championship, they're playing his music, and then they interrupt it. There was one where Owen Hart defeated Bret Hart to become world champion, and then they reversed it. They may have done it with Razor Ramon, Scott Hall as well. So they've done it a bunch of times. And I always think that unless you're going to give it to them soon, you've kind of killed their moment.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from there, definitely.
Because it's already happened, people then feel let down, and then when it happens, we've kind of, even if we know that the previous time didn't count, then we've kind of already experienced a version of that moment, but then have like the negative, oh well, that didn't count last time. So it's just. Yeah,
I think the only time that I can remember that, didn't something similar happen with Daniel Bryan when he was leading up to that big WrestleMania moment against Triple H, or Evolution essentially? Didn't he win it and then have to give it back, and then he had to compete for it again? Wasn't there something to do with that in the build up to that?
Maybe. Now, one thing that did happen is they had, and this was both good and bad. I actually was at SummerSlam 2013 in attendance live, and Daniel Bryan defeated John Cena for the WWE Championship. There was confetti, and the celebration went on ages, and then Randy Orton came and cashed in the Money in the Bank. And so from that whole build-up, just to, he was world champion for all the 4 minutes. And it's like, well, you've then got to build him back up again, and everyone say, well, he's former world champion, and it's not as special. And even though there was an aspect to that was like really good, the way they did it, because with all the confetti, no one saw that moment coming, and it did work. But that world championship did count. But they do things where they build people up and then rip it away, and then it often knocks them down for months before they get back into the picture.
Yeah, I can definitely see that.
Okay, so let's just skip back. We had gone past Mike Kanellis and Maria Kanellis. Well, Mike had asked for his release a few months ago, so he's now got what he wanted.
Yeah, I think I read somewhere that the only reason he was really there was because they were obviously paying a lot at the time to make sure that wrestlers didn't go to other companies.
Yeah.
And so because he's got 2 young kids now, he was just basically taking a paycheck and not really doing a lot of work. Which is a real shame, because he was big on the independents, and I'm pretty sure in Impact as well with Maria.
Yeah, and he'd been in Ring of Honor. They'd been in Ring of Honor together, and yeah, he'd been a relatively big deal. But once again, similar to it almost feels like the storyline with Rusev and Bobby Lashley had originally been written for Mike and Maria, where she was just berating him, and then she ended up as the 24/7 champion whilst pregnant, and that's something that's relevant as well, because obviously I don't think we've seen her since probably she had to go and have a baby. And so they've got like an infant baby at home, and now they've both been fired, which kind of sucks.
Yeah, definitely. And it's one of those ones as well where like they only really ever used him when she was around. I know I'm pretty sure that's the second child that they've had. So there's two occasions where she's had to go, and so he's gone with her, and they've just never used him. And it seems such a shame, because, as I say, it was such a big thing on Impact and in Ring of Honor and all different other promotions, and then to have nothing as well. He didn't even have an NXT run, from what I remember. He literally just came in and then was never really used. It's such a shame. Yeah,
absolutely. But I think they'll end up Impact, Ring of Honor, potentially AEW.
Yeah.
With AEW, I think some of this, I think they're going to have a little look at who there is, and some of them I think they'll grab straight away. I think they'll grab Rusev straight away. They will probably take Anderson and Gallows straight away. Maybe because Cody Rhodes, I think, is a good friend of Zack Ryder and has put out like some Instagram thing or something to him already, so everyone sees that on the cards. But some of them I think they'll let go to other places first, because I think AEW don't want to be seen as TNA years ago. As soon as someone got fired from WWE, they'd snatch them up, and it just seemed like the WWE reject zone. But I think AEW will allow some people to go and build themselves back up, either in Impact or NWA or somewhere else, and then they'll get some of them later down the line.
That makes a lot of sense. I think from both aspects as well. So, you look at, if they just take everyone from WWE, then they're going to have the same opportunities that they had in WWE. Whereas if they go to other places, they can become that big fish almost, and then they can, build their stock even more to then come back and have better opportunities when they do come back.
Yeah, yeah, completely agree. Okay, so next on the list is No Way Jose. So this is he never did anything meaningful on the main roster. He was
No.
basically just Adam Rose again. Do you remember Adam Rose?
Yeah, I remember Adam Rose.
Just like a conga line. What is the point
Yeah.
of that? How is that a gimmick? What was the point?
Well, I don't know. This is the thing was in NXT it was like a massive thing. He was very over with the fans when he was in NXT. Same sort of thing, he had the conga line, he was dancing, but I think the thing about it was he actually had some meaningful feuds in NXT. He went against Austin Aries at one point, and it was entertaining. But then they brought him up to the main roster. I think it's one of these things I've found a few times where on NXT, because it's a smaller arena that they perform in. Everything feels a lot sort of less diluted, whereas when they go up to the main roster, all the big lights, everything sort of gets drowned out almost.
Yeah.
So when you take a conga line of, say, 10 people, in a smaller room, they kind of fill the ramp and they surround the ring almost. Whereas when they go to WWE, it's just, they're all at the bottom of the ramp at the same time and there's no one filling the rest of it. I just felt like it was one of those things with him. And as I say, on the main roster, he just never really did anything. That they very quickly just made him a jobber. Same as Apollo Crews as well, who was brilliant in NXT.
And do you know what? Who did he wrestle a week or two ago on Raw? He had quite a long match.
Oh, I don't know, to be honest.
I can't remember. Like when I saw it, I was just like surprised that he was even on TV. They have never ever used him. They've never pushed him.
No, not at all. I think at one point he tried changing his hair because he used to have like this massive afro,
right?
And now, well, I think the last time I saw him, at least, he had like these green braids all hanging around, and it was never used. It was a fairly solid wrestler in NXT. This is obviously before they had all like the North American Championship, so it was either you were competing for the NXT title, the Tag Team Championship, or you just had a feud with someone. So
yeah.
He probably missed out in that sense.
Okay, so next on the list, I can't even think who this is. Diona Perazzo. Who is that?
Oh, she's a female wrestler in NXT.
Okay, I don't know off the top of my head.
I believe, I can't remember if it's her or Casey Catanzaro that is with Ricochet. I think one of them is Ricochet's girlfriend.
Okay, so this would be another example.
It could be. I can't remember which one it is. I think it might be Diona Perazzo. But yeah, she's one of these ones. I feel like she may have gone away for a while and just come back. I think she may have fallen out of love with wrestling a little bit recently.
Yeah.
It's not a massive surprise, but very, very talented in the ring. It's just one of these ones. She's very much at the start of her career from what I've gathered from NXT. So she's never been a big player down there. But she's a very small woman from what I remember. And I think she climbs up the ring post to get into the ring on her entrance. It's quite a cool one.
Okay, so yeah, I think I know who this is. She was in the Women's Royal Rumble or something like a year ago, and didn't she like just do like some surprising things?
Quite possibly, yeah. She's very athletic, very small woman.
Okay, Alexander.
Oh, Yaksic.
Yeah, I don't even know who this is.
No, I don't know who that is either.
Okay,
I've seen that he's an NXT wrestler, but I've never seen him on NXT TV.
Yeah. Okay. MJ Jenkins. Do you know who this is?
No, same again.
Okay, and then last is Dorian Mack.
No, I don't know who that is either.
Okay, so like the problem from my point of view is that I've seen a lot more AEW recently than NXT, but
yeah,
yes, but like even if they are there, if they're only there once a month or something, then there's going to be people we miss. But then we get on to the producers and coaches, and the top one is Kurt Angle. Now, what's your take on them releasing Kurt Angle in the midst of this?
I think it's a strange one. He's obviously a very experienced head around the backstage area. You know, he's been going for years and years. He's obviously got a lot of input that he can have. I wonder whether it's one of these things where he maybe wants to get away from it. But definitely a strange one for me that he was one of the ones to go. Yeah,
like they had an interesting relationship because obviously he was in TNA for quite a long time and he wanted to go back to WWE, but for some reason there was quite a lot of resistance to bringing him back. Eventually they did, and he was never used as well on his return to WWE as he had been being used in TNA. And that's perhaps because he'd got injuries or if he'd got substance abuse problems and stuff and they didn't want to fully push him. There was that one time he was a member of the Shield, which was quite funny.
Yeah.
Do you remember that? Yeah.
Yeah, I vaguely remember that. Yeah.
And he was like in the full like Shield get up. I
Bulletproof
like that as an
vest,
idea. Yeah. But then he had his last ever match last year at WrestleMania against Baron Corbin, which he lost. And
it was underwhelming to say the least.
Sorry?
It was underwhelming to say the least.
I almost feel that Kurt Angle, now he's put out a tweet where he just seems thankful, grateful, and he might just think, well, I'm done in the ring at this stage. If I was him, I might say, well, I've retired in WWE, but I might go to AEW because I want one more match with Cody or with perhaps someone who he hasn't wrestled, Kenny Omega, and he says, and I want to end my career the way it should end, you know. And if I was him, I would think, I'm only a year out. I wrestled Baron Corbin, which everyone hated. So let's just do one last thing to ride off into the sunset.
Yeah, maybe. I've seen an interview with him recently where he said actually that his quality of life isn't the best because of all the injuries that he's had and all that kind of stuff. So
well,
I don't know if he came back. I don't know if it would be in a in-ring capacity, but
True.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he went to another company and went as a backstage producer, or if he came in as a manager or something like that. You know, Ric Flair did it for Charlotte Flair. Maybe he could do the same for another wrestler.
What, like his son?
Well, his son. He's still a backstage producer, isn't he, Jason Jordan? He's been working on that in recent years. But, yeah, you know, he could even do, you know, like an Arn Anderson is doing in AEW.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just knocked my headphone out as I did that. I was very excited about the thought of him going to AEW.
Yeah.
But yeah.
No, I think he'd be an asset wherever because obviously he's got a great mind for the business and it just seems like he's an Olympic gold medalist. Like he won it, so the injuries you're completely right about because as we all know, he won an Olympic gold medal with a broken freaking neck. But so even if he didn't do anything physical, he's an Olympic gold medalist. He could always turn up to any promotional events, any talk shows, and he wouldn't just be representing WWE or whichever promotion. He'd also be like this American sports hero. So it boggled my mind that he was on that list. He was like out of everyone released, other than the fact that he's now retired, he is by far the biggest name.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously he's relatively new to it as well. Obviously he was doing the general manager part and then he was still wrestling on the side of that as well. He had his last match, I think it was only a year ago or something.
Yeah, Mania last year.
So yeah, it seems strange he's still relatively new to the position. And so to take him out now does seem a bit of an odd choice. Yeah.
Next up, there's Lance Storm, who this is one of the ones I feel most cross about because I'd been seeing on Twitter and stuff just because he retired many years ago. He seemed to retire early, but then he went into training wrestlers and he had like a training school for about 10 years. And then a few months ago, he's like, I'm closing it down. So the current class is going to be the last class. And there's just going to be a new chapter in my life. And it was like a surprise and a big reveal. Yeah, that new chapter is I was winding this down so I can go and be a producer and agent for WWE. And they've released him. And so unless he's got the potential to come back, because he is someone that fits into the pattern of, well, if he lives in Canada, obviously he's not going to be flying to the Performance Centre every week. So it's like, well, we'll release you for now, but we'll bring you back later. But other than that, it feels very cruel.
Yeah, definitely. You know, as you said, I don't really know too much about Lance Storm. I sort of vaguely saw him when I was a kid on TV. I knew a little bit about the wrestling academy that he had as well. So yeah, it definitely seems like a cruel one for him to not be able. Because now essentially he's got nothing. He's
exactly.
not got his wrestling school. He's not got this job. So
he did used to do a podcast with Don Callis, who is the main person that runs Impact Wrestling, and so there was a big chance he could have ended up working with Impact. So I think that is where he will end up because they're, I think, fairly Canadian based now. So he could just go and do stuff with Impact. But yeah, so his history, just to say the little bit of history of Lance Storm, is he trained at Stu Hart's dungeon, where like obviously Bret Hart, the Hart family, Owen Hart, the British Bulldog, and everyone else came through that. He was one of the later graduates of the Hart family dungeon. He made a name for himself first in ECW. He was part of the Impact players with Just Incredible. He then went to WCW for like the last year and a half, and whilst he was in WCW, he won the United States Championship, which he renamed the Canadian Championship. He won the Hardcore Championship, which he renamed something like the Stampede International Brawl Champ. He like renamed every belt. He won the he had like all of the titles at one stage except for the WCW World Title, which he never got, which was a shame. But he ran like a Team Canada or whatever they were called. Then he obviously was part of the invasion from WCW and ECW into WWE. But then they started just not using him after that point in WWE. I think he had a tag team with Christian at one stage, and I think he could see the writing on the wall that he was always just going to be a mid-card player in WWE, and he retired early. But hell of a talented guy, and to me that's a real shame. And next on the list is the Hurricane. Do you remember the Hurricane?
Yes, I do. I remember his feud with The Rock when I was a kid.
Yeah, that was great. Didn't
was
he actually
brilliant.
start doing the Rock Bottom as a finisher?
Quite possibly. I know that The Rock put him over at one point as well.
Yeah. That's another example, and perhaps there was some. Do you remember Little Spike Dudley and Tajiri? Do you remember those guys?
Yeah.
Okay, so all three of those, Hurricane, Spike Dudley, and Tajiri, had pushes on like Raw or something, where they'd be in a main event against The Rock or against Steve Austin or against The Undertaker or something, and it would seem like, oh my god, this complete underdog could be a main eventer and world champion. And WWE would always push it, and then like 2 weeks later just start jobbing them out again.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and that is what happened with the Hurricane. But then later on he tagged with Kane, I believe, and they were called the Hurricanes.
Okay.
But yeah, so he came back as a producer or something a year ago or 2 years ago. About a year ago, in fact, because I think he may have been at All In, the pre-AEW pay-per-view. But yeah, so it's a shame for him to go. But I think he'll end up back in WWE, or if not, he'll just AEW or Impact. He'll be fine.
Yeah, I think he's got quite a strong link with Matt Hardy, hasn't he?
He does. Okay, so Matt Hardy trained him. That's a very good point. So the Hardy Boys had a promotion which was basically just a backyard wrestling indie promotion, which I think was called Omega, and I can't remember what it stood for. No, I really can't remember what Omega stands for. But one of the people they trained was Sugar Shane Helms. So yeah, you're right there. So perhaps he'll.
So yeah, there's an obvious link there, obviously, with Matt Hardy just arriving there.
Yeah. Oh my god, how so if just imagine a few weeks ago, if you were even the Revival a week ago, the Revival, Matt Hardy, Brody Lee, I don't think they'd have fired Matt Hardy in this same list unless they got wind that he was thinking of leaving. But some of these guys that have only just got to AEW, they could have been on this list, and if Brody Lee was in the middle of this list, maybe he doesn't get hired because they might prioritise other people along the way.
Yeah, potentially. I think they definitely kind of got the better timing of it, I suppose. But
because they leave on their terms.
Exactly. Yeah, and with people like Brody Lee and Matt Hardy, they weren't used a lot towards the end. Matt Hardy was used a little bit more, I suppose, with the Randy Orton and Edge situation. But it's not like the Revival where they were kind of downgraded quite a lot before they left. They still left on relatively high terms with like the fans.
Yeah, absolutely. So next it says Sarah Stock. Do you know who that is?
No, I don't. I can't. No, it's not the Sarah that I'm thinking of. So no.
No, I don't know who she is. Then it says Scott Armstrong, who obviously was a referee. Do you know anything more about Scott than that?
Is he the one who does the really slow count?
Quite possibly.
He takes forever. He kind of he goes down and then he pulls right back and then down again. It takes forever, and I always think it takes way too long for him to count to 3.
Yeah, so the other interesting thing about Scott Armstrong is he is the brother of Road Dogg Jesse James.
Oh, okay. I think he's probably on one of these lists of things that I've seen before, like John Laurinaitis and one of the...
Legion of Doom.
That's the one.
Animal, yeah. Yeah, there's some weird, family that, I don't know if this is a bit too old school, but there's you obviously know who Macho Man Randy Savage is.
Yep.
Okay, so have you ever seen or heard of the wrestler, the genius Lanny Poffo?
No.
Okay, so who is it? Do you know Damien Sandow?
Yes.
So when he came in, his gimmick was that he'd be there and he'd read a poem and recite poetry, and he had a big beard and stuff like this.
The intellectual savior.
That's it. Even the name, the intellectual savior. It was basically his gimmick was a retread of the wrestler who was called the Genius, who would wear like a mortarboard and like as if he just graduated college, and he'd come out and he'd read a poem, and you'd never have guessed it from the gimmick, but he was the brother of the Macho Man.
Wow.
And yeah, and when you see Johnny Ace, John Laurinaitis, and you think, well, his brother is a Road Warrior, the Legion of Doom. Some of these things are surprising, but
I know, it's strange.
There's a whole family of Armstrongs, and in fact, I think the father of the Armstrongs, his name's Bullet Bob Armstrong. I think he was recently diagnosed perhaps with even like terminal cancer. So that feels a bit of a shame again for these extenuating circumstances to see him on this list. Yeah,
definitely. Well, obviously, you got another referee that's on the list, Mike Chioda.
Yeah, he's been there forever.
Oh, man, he's one of the mainstays in the company.
Yeah.
He was the one, I think, who, when Triple H came in and took over, he, on the referee's side, said that they had no confidence in him. Do you remember that angle?
Was this where, like, literally they all walked out on Triple H?
Yeah.
Yes, I kind of do. And, well, I don't specifically remember this, but Mike Chioda was, like, the spokesperson for the referees.
Yeah.
That's great. I like that.
He wasn't quite one of the ones who, back in the day, they used to have, like, pay-per-views. They had Raw referees against SmackDown referees. I don't think he was one of those ones.
Okay.
But he was definitely the voice of the referees when Triple H came in and took over.
Well, like obviously, I think he has been there for 30-something years. And so almost all of the history of WWE, because I think it goes back to the very late 80s, almost every pay-per-view, every show, you're going to be seeing him on every year. Why would they fire him? Why?
I don't know. He's one of these ones who you kind of, as far as referees go, you kind of remember him. So, you've got the ones like Charles Robinson, you remember his long, floppy blonde hair.
So you may not know this. Charles Robinson, he's not a natural blonde. His gimmick was that he had the same haircut as Ric Flair, and they were both in WCW, and he was like an evil referee who was rigging things for Ric Flair, and he had the nickname Little Nate. Okay,
I didn't know about that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
He's kept it all these years.
Yeah.
But then you've got, the ones like Scott Armstrong, I said, is the one who counts really slowly. Mike Chioda's the one who, when he does two, he goes like that to the bell ringer.
Yeah, yeah.
I've seen that on so many pay-per-views. You just think, like, he's one of the referees you remember. He, like, as far as refereeing goes, he's always done well as well. I can't remember him botching any finishes or anything like that. So,
do you have a favourite referee of all time, Sam?
Oh, man, now you're asking. I kind of liked... there was two that had a match back in the day, and it was Nick Robinson.
No, Nick Patrick, do you mean?
Nick Patrick, that's it, yep. And Earl Hebner.
Earl Hebner, yeah.
Those two were great. Earl Hebner's son is also a referee now.
I know. Well, okay, so the interesting thing with these guys is, again, Nick Patrick goes back to the days of WCW, and he was even though, actually, no, I'm going to tell a lie, but he was perhaps the one that made it famous for the evil referee. When there was the NWO in WCW, Nick Patrick was the NWO referee who would do the fast counts and all the slow counts and stuff like this. But Earl Hebner himself, who was obviously now most famous for the Montreal Screwjob with everything with Bret Hart, he was the original, I think, evil referee in any form whatsoever, in that he has a twin brother who, like, is an identical twin.
Okay.
They don't look identical now because the other one is Dave Hebner, who I think put on a lot of weight. But they did a screwy finish, might have been when Andre the Giant won the World Championship from Hulk Hogan, where the referee was said to be Dave Hebner, but then later on they proved that it was the evil twin brother Earl Hebner, or something like this. I can't quite remember. Okay. But then what happened is, like, I remember years and years ago, I'd speak about wrestling to people, and I'd say that the most shocking thing, like if I took over the WWE, I'd joke and say this, that just to prove my to prove my ground that I'm in charge, I'd go in and fire Earl Hebner. And I'd say that as the example of the person that would never ever get fired.
Yeah.
But then him and Dave Hebner worked there, and they were fired because they were like either stealing merchandise or selling counterfeit merchandise or something like this. And so they've bounced around. I think Earl Hebner's currently in AEW, but they've bounced around TNA and loads of promotions since. I can't even remember why we're talking about referees here.
Well, because two of the people released the Mike Chioda and Scott Armstrong. But do you have a favourite referee? As I feel like it should be turned back to you.
Yeah. At the moment, I'm going to say Ref Aubrey in AEW.
She's brilliant.
Yeah, she is so good. Like, she has like the best facial expressions, and it's such an unusual thing to have a female referee. It's very rarely happened, but like I completely buy into everything she does.
Yeah,
you know, I believe her authority, which is the thing that sells it most.
Yeah, 100%, definitely. And Chris Jericho's been on commentary having a go at her recently as well, hasn't he?
Yeah. Jericho's great on commentary.
He's spectacular in everything he does.
Yeah, it's very true. Do you know what? Even like a few weeks ago, the first time there was no audience and they had Triple H on commentary, it's like this is right. This is great. I liked it.
It's weird because you think like the old school wrestlers seem to have bucket loads more personality than the vast majority of wrestlers these days. You know, you think like The Rock, Triple H, Stone Cold, even John Cena to an extent as well. They've got these big characters. You know, but now, you know, if you see any of them, even like, Kevin Owens is a lot better on commentary than a lot of others. But there's a lot that go on there, and you just think, this is not adding anything to it at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even to the extent that Orange Cassidy was on commentary recently, and he had a bigger character than most people in WWE, and didn't say a word. He just fell asleep.
I like Orange Cassidy. I know he's a controversial thing, but
I think he's brilliant.
I think it works. I think a lot of these things that are said to be controversial and in that they kill the business or don't work, I think a few tweaks here or there, even when we spoke about the Firefly Funhouse match, which I'm quite proud I even managed to say that sentence without stumbling this time. But even in that match, it's like a few tweaks to me could have made it work a lot better. And something like Orange Cassidy, like the part about it to me that doesn't work is if people were to sell his moves as working. But in AEW, they may have had that he kicks Pac and then Pac kicks him back in a sloppy way. But the reaction from Pac is always like, well, what are we doing? This isn't hurting. If ever people would start selling the weak kicks, then it wouldn't work. But what he's doing, it's not that he's doing these kicks expecting it to work. It's just he doesn't care.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah. Okay, so Billy Kidman is next on the list. Do you know who Billy Kidman is?
Vaguely. I can't picture his face, but I know that sort of back in WCW days, he was quite big, wasn't he?
Yeah. So he actually pinned Hulk Hogan in, like, just as we said about Hurricane Helms got a win over The Rock. There was a storyline where there was like the new blood, as they were called, like the young guys taking on the older wrestlers, and Billy Kidman actually got a win over Hulk Hogan. He was married to Tori Wilson for some time, if you remember who she is.
Of course.
And he was cruiserweight. He tagged with, who did he tag with? Maybe Spanky, the Brian Kendrick.
Right.
Yeah, and I think they were a tag team. Or maybe it was, no, I tell a lie. Maybe it was a tag team with Paul London, and then Paul London later tagged with Brian Kendrick. But, yeah, so he's been backstage for a long time. He's supposed to be good there. It seems a shame to see him go, but, yeah, I don't have too much comment on that otherwise.
Was Billy Kidman the one who said that Kofi Kingston should think about taking steroids?
Seriously? I don't remember that.
I felt there was a thing around the time that Kofi Mania was happening last year. There was a thing, one of the old school WWE wrestlers, may have been Billy Kidman, I may be completely getting that wrong.
I think you are. I think... wasn't it someone like superstar Billy Graham?
Billy Graham.
Billy Graham, not Billy Kidman.
Yeah, maybe that's where I'm getting confused. But yeah,
I tell you what though, Sam, that is the only time in history that someone has ever muddled up superstar Billy Graham with Billy Kidman.
I'm showing my youth. I'm glad.
Just look up a picture of both of them and you'll see how comical that is.
Right, I'll have a look now.
Do it. Okay. Whilst you're doing that, I'm just going to mention the next one on the list is Dave Finlay, who obviously in WWE was just called Finlay. He was the introduction of Hornswoggle, or as he was known at the time, the Little Bastard.
Yeah.
And yeah, he by the time he got to WWE, he was still good in the ring, old school British style wrestler like William Regal and that sort of era of performer. So he was already a little bit past his prime, but hell of a good wrestler. And the thing you mostly hear about with Dave Finlay nowadays is that he works as an agent mostly with the women's division, and that he's like the god that can put together their matches. So
yeah. No, I mean, I remember Finlay from that time when he was introducing Hornswoggle. He had the shillelagh as his weapon of choice as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember him having, he was in, I think it was a King of the Ring tournament where he beat the, oh no, it was William Regal that beat the Great Khali, I think, maybe. I can't remember now. But somebody beat the Great Khali, and then William Regal won the tournament overall. But yeah, he did quite a lot of things with Hornswoggle especially. I really enjoyed him. He's come out a few times as well when there's been brawls where he's been one of the backstage people coming out and breaking up the brawl. So
and that's a touch I always like as well, because it's like to brand new fans, they wouldn't know who that is, but to someone who's been watching it for years, they'd be like, "Oh, Finlay's going to come in and do something," and it just adds a bit more authenticity to it.
Yeah, definitely. In terms of his wrestling, obviously I enjoyed him as a kid. Obviously, I don't know too much about what his role backstage is or anything like that. Obviously, I know you say about the women's division, and I think it's a shame to have someone who's been there for so long have to go under these circumstances.
Yeah, one of the things that I think is that I always think of with Finlay is that I always found it so rare but innovative that people would do a baseball slide and he'd grab the ring apron, and so they would just slide in between the ring apron and the ring, and then he'd just either pull it over their head or they couldn't get out, they were a bit trapped. Stuff like that. He was, great wrestler. I'm sure AEW, they've got like Arn Anderson, they've got Tully Blanchard, and some of these old school guys, they're just going to be like salivating to like think we can get, because they've got Dean Malenko backstage, they're going to be like Lance Storm, maybe Kidman, but certainly Dave Finlay, we can get some of these guys.
DDP as well.
DDP, yeah.
I've also just got a picture of both the Billies, and I realise how big of a difference there is. Billy Kidman is like the typical cruiserweight, and then you've got Billy Graham is like a knockoff Hulk Hogan.
Oh, okay, so Billy Graham predates Hulk Hogan.
Okay.
So Hulk Hogan is a knockoff Billy Graham, actually.
Oh, fair play then, fair play.
Okay, next on the list, I've got Pat Buck. I don't know who this is. He's not related to the Young Bucks. I can't think who Pat Buck is.
No, neither can I.
I'm just going to try and look him up briefly, just because it's a name I know. Pat Buck.
Okay, so it's not one that I know personally, so I don't know.
Okay, so I've just got a message from Dave saying I'm assuming that you can't see the comments coming in. So, no, what are the comments, Dave? If you're watching this, Dave, we are not getting the comments coming in. Where are the comments coming from? So, is it just that we can't hear Sam after all this? This has just been a fun chat, Sam, this whole time.
No!
Hang on, let's see what it is. In a second, we should hear you go, no. Okay, I can hear you. I can hear both of us. We're good. No, Dave, if you're watching this, I have no idea what the comments are. So, obviously I've clicked something or something's not working. I am not getting the comments coming through. So let's just have a quick check. Dave is typing currently, so he may be about to rescue us with this. Not many, sorry to interrupt. So now all that we've learned from this is... Okay, Dave has been commenting. And I've just also heard that comments
probably correcting a lot of my facts.
Yeah. So we've got sup guys, says Dave. Dave also says, oh no. Oh, this is terrible. I can't believe I'm about to reveal this. Howard Finkel has passed away. So the ring announcer.
Oh.
I think he was the very first employee of the WWE. I can't believe I'm finding this out on a podcast.
Wasn't he in DX as well at one point?
Oh God, I don't know about that. Possibly. But
Someone,
like
one
Howard
of the
Finkel is
announcers
the greatest ring announcer of all time. We're just going to speak briefly about Howard Finkel here. Gosh,
It's one of those voices you just recognise straight away, isn't it?
Wow, this match is scheduled for one. You know,
yeah, sort of
announced Hulk
semi-breathy.
Hogan. Sorry.
Semi-breathy, his voice. It's sort of there's a bit of air behind it almost.
And new,
And new world heavyweight champion.
Yeah. Wow. He was like all throughout the Hulk Hogan era, all throughout like Bret Hart era, Shawn Michaels, and into the more modern times. It was probably only in the mid-noughties that like Lillian Garcia took over, but that is tragic. I am so sad to hear that.
Yeah, definitely.
I know that he'd been in a wheelchair for some time. Let's just see this. Howard Finkel passes away. Let's see what it says. WWE is saddened to learn that Howard Finkel has passed away aged 69. I really hope this isn't going to be related to coronavirus. When considered the greatest ring announcers in the history of sports and sports entertainment, you'd be hard-pressed to name better than Howard Finkel. Native of Newark, the Fink, as he was known, of course, label that has been attached affectionately to Howard over the years, made his ring announcing debut at Madison Square Garden in 1977. Wow. So it doesn't say. It says no word on the reason for his passing yet, but he had been in poor health since suffering a stroke in 2018. So I know he'd been like in a wheelchair, but that's very, very sad to read. So
Rest in peace.
Rest in peace, Howard Finkel, the Fink. We will continue because we're near the end of this list, but that's really sad. We were just looking up who Pat Buck is, and I don't know who he is, to be honest. It says, no, I've got no idea who this is.
All I've got, I think, was... Oh, no, I don't think he is. There was a list of a few different people who were like NXT coaches or trainers, but I don't know if he was one of those or not.
Yeah. But that's a shame for Pat Buck, whoever he is. Sean Daivari, do you remember Daivari?
Vaguely. He kind of played an anti-American sort of gimmick, didn't he? Which was, nowadays, would be very much out of taste.
Yeah, so he came in with the character Mohammed Hassan, and he actually outlasted that character, because that character had got like the anti-American gimmick, and it happened around the time that there was... again, this is going into like some real life territory here, but there was the 7/7 bombings in London, and it was playing off some of the whole stuff post 9/11 basically, and some of like the anti-American stereotypes there, and they actually aired SmackDown, which had been taped, which very much had that sort of terrorist look that he was attacking the Undertaker or something. And even they didn't play it in the UK, but they played it in America. But because everything with 7/7 had just happened, it got such negative, like feedback. It was rumored that, because I think the Undertaker was world champion at the time, that Mohammed Hassan was going to beat him for the world title. But they kept him off TV because I think whichever channel they were on, Sci-Fi Network or whatever at the time, said that we're not having this character on TV. So they then like played on WWE.com or YouTube, whatever it may have been about at the time, saying, "Oh, I've been banned from television." He wrestled the Undertaker at the pay-per-view. The Undertaker squashed him, and you never saw the character again.
Wow.
But I think we did get Daivari for a little while longer. I think Daivari was then in Impact, and then I think they brought him back just about a year ago or something.
Oh, okay. I think his brother or something is in WWE as well, or was. He was in the Cruiserweight Classic.
Yes, I can't remember this.
Aria Daivari.
Yeah, okay. But he's not still there, is he?
I don't know for sure, to be honest. I remember seeing him in the Cruiserweight Classic. He was on 205 Live, and I don't know if he's still there to this day. Okay.
Mike Rotunda, do you know who this is off the top of your head?
Is this someone related to Bray Wyatt and Bo Dallas? Is it like their uncle or something?
It's his dad.
Oh, it is the dad?
Yeah, but more than this, Mike Rotunda was the wrestler known as IRS, who was the tag team partner of the $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase.
Oh, okay.
So they were called Money Incorporated, and IRS would always wrestle with a tie on. And even though he was a heel, it was like crazy because I don't think his gimmick was so much that he would strangle people with his tie, but it just seemed like people would pick him up by his tie. It's like, why would you put yourself at such an obvious disadvantage?
Yeah.
And they won the tag team championships. Before that, he'd been part of the Varsity Club in like NWA or WCW and stuff like this. But yeah, the father of the Wyatts. I think it's father and not uncle, like you said, but it has made me doubt it now. So
I think it's quite a wrestling family. I'm pretty sure there is their uncle is something. I don't know exactly.
Okay.
What he is within the wrestling business.
So I've just put in for Bray Wyatt on Wikipedia, and it says Mike Rotunda is his father, Bo Dallas is his brother. Oh yeah, uncle is Barry Windham, who was one of the original Four Horsemen. Kendall Windham is the less successful brother of Barry, basically. And Blackjack Mulligan was the grandfather. I'd completely forgot that. So yeah, a big wrestling family there. Big wrestling family. But so yeah, Mike Rotunda, he's been there forever. And like, when you've most recently, like, do you remember years ago they did like a thing where they were playing Jeopardy or something, or the Wheel of Fortune or something on Raw, when they used to have like guest hosts? Does this ring a bell?
Vaguely, yeah.
So whoever was like the actual host of Jeopardy, they'd got like Chris Jericho as one of the guests on it, and maybe John Cena, and then just randomly they'd got IRS on it. And it was always great when they nowadays WWE, when they bring back a old star, usually it's just something backstage just so Ron Simmons can go damn or something like this. But IRS would be one of these ones you'd periodically see like this. Okay, so I think that is almost the end of the list, just because the other ones I don't think I know. Serena Deeb, do you know who that is?
No.
Ace Steel, I know the name, but I couldn't tell you who he is.
He's a coach in NXT from what I know, so I don't really know anything about him
Ace
individually.
Steel. I've got a feeling that he's just a wrestler that was on the independent scene, has now just made it as a coach. But I can't think who Ace Steel is in terms of seeing their in-ring stuff. No. So Ace Steel, let's just see if there's anything about him. Best known for his time with Ring of Honor and occasionally with WWE. Yeah, so he never particularly made it. I don't think. No. Nothing of... Okay, it says he wrestled a tag team match with his former student CM Punk. So, sounds like he trained CM Punk. So, why would you fire the person that trained CM Punk? Okay, but anyway.
Wow. They don't seem to want CM Punk too much, so...
No. It's what like... CM Punk doesn't work for WWE because he works for the channel Fox. But if WWE could have added CM Punk to this list, I'm sure they would have done.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think that's crazy that they haven't tried to work something out with Punk. But at the same time, I think Punk is crazy. AEW basically could have started their whole promotion based around him. And they probably wouldn't take him now.
Yeah.
Or they might. To be honest, they might think, oh yeah, we'll take CM Punk. But WWE have even slyly done the thing where he's turned up on their backstage program and he's just so devalued now. Yeah,
definitely. I think a lot of that he did himself when he went to UFC. Because he went in, I think he had 2 or 3 matches, lost them all quite badly.
He lost 2. The first one, he got his face absolutely mashed.
Yeah.
And the second one, it wasn't a screwy finish, but it went to like a second round, or it went to like a 3-round tie, and he lost by decision. But Dana White, I can't remember, someone like Mike Jackson, or the name was, basically said that his opponent, after winning by decision, was fired because he should have been able to win decisively. And he thinks that not that the opponent was throwing the fight, but his opponent wasn't fighting competitively. But yeah, I think that killed his career. And then last ones we've Kendo Kassin, don't know who that is. Mike Chioda we've spoken about, and then announcers and presenters. Aiden English, obviously we mentioned.
Yeah.
Jerry Soto was the Spanish commentator.
Yep.
Don't know him, but obviously why do it? And then Josiah Williams. Who is that off the top of your head?
I don't know who Josiah Williams is.
It says he's an announcer in NXT. And then it just says one other person, Andrea Listenberger in creative. Don't know who she is, but there you
I
go.
think she's
Like
been a writer.
Yeah, absolutely huge list of people.
Absolutely, yeah.
Do we think that's the end of it, or do we think that there's going to be more?
I sort of would hope that it's the end of it. You know, there's enough negativity going on at the moment. So if this could be all of it, that would be ideal for everyone.
Yeah.
You know, it's one of those things with WWE. You know, they can change their mind at the drop of a hat, can't they? So this could just be the start of it, and we could end up with 50, 60 names. Obviously, the one thing to remind is the fact that some of these names may have been furloughed rather than released.
Yes.
So
some of them could be back.
Yeah, definitely. It would just be that they're on less money than they were before, but they're not actually released. They are still under contract. So which of those it is, I don't know, though.
So the other big thought going into this, just like as we begin to wrap this up, I guess, but just the other thoughts, the considerations to put into this was that obviously Vince McMahon ran the XFL, and that went bankrupt.
Yeah. The second time, isn't it, that's gone bankrupt?
Yeah, he created it in about the year 2000, 2001. It lasted one season. Then it came back. They'd played 5 out of 10 games or 10 weeks or however the league worked. And then obviously the coronavirus shut everything down. And rather than pay people for the rest of the season, he's called it quits.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's one of those ones where, he really should have learned his lesson the first time and not tried to do it again, to be honest. But
yeah,
it's, it's one of those things, isn't it?
But obviously, if McMahon invested $100 million, which is what I heard 3 years ago, so gosh knows if that's gone up at all, $100 million into that. The other rumour, and this is the reason why they announced within the last week. Okay, so hang on, we've just got a comment coming through. So it says Ace Steel played Donald Trump in a match against Rosie O'Donnell on Raw that got hugely booed by the live audience. I so vaguely remember that. Do you have any recollection of that?
Not at all.
I've got the vaguest memory, but I just remember that it was very occasionally in wrestling you'll get a match where they put something on TV for their own amusement, and it just shouldn't happen. Back in the 90s, when there was the war with WCW, they did the Nacho Man and the Huckster, which were takes off on Hulk Hogan and Macho Man, as if they were incredibly old, with billionaire Ted, supposed to be the owner of WCW, Ted Turner, and they had a match at WrestleMania. And it's like, why put that on television? You're just hurting your own audience because no one cares. But occasionally they do these things for their own amusement.
See, the thing is, I've never really seen anything like that. Obviously, I've seen the ones where Donald Trump and Vince McMahon were feuding against each other, but they had a match which was Bobby Lashley against Umaga.
Yeah.
The only thing I can think of that's vaguely similar to that is when I used to watch TNA, and they had Curry Man, which used to make me laugh. Curry Man and Shark Boy.
Okay, hang on. But both of those were Curry Man is the fallen angel Christopher Daniels. Did you know that?
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
So
Christopher Daniels, who's now in SCU. That was a gimmick he had in Japan, and he was Curry Man, and it was just like a crazy gimmick. But Shark Boy was supposedly somewhat serious, except for they did him as a takeoff on Steve Austin and stuff like this.
Yeah.
Anyway, I can't. Oh yeah, so we got onto Ace Steel there, which segued it. But just to come back to the subject, so. The rumour going around that WWE has now been seen as an essential business that has to operate in Florida. And gosh knows if there's any dodgy dealings, which is the rumour for how they've been able to swing that. But the rumour going about was that they had the 2 or 3 weeks where they taped shows which led up to WrestleMania. But their contract with USA Network or Fox Network or whatever channel they're on in America would allow for 3 taped shows a year, which are usually reserved for Christmas or the Christmas week. And then if they go and perform in Europe or London, and obviously the time delay means they can't be live. And with this whole situation going on, this made them vulnerable that the Fox Network, where they started there about October last year, could turn around and say, well, we're paying you $1 billion for 5 years of SmackDown. They haven't had the ratings, even going back to October, that they hoped they would. And now they could use it as a get-out clause. So WWE had kind of put in the position where if it was the case that they were going to lose this deal, they had to go live again.
Yeah. I definitely saw something about that. I saw it as Vince McMahon was concerned that there could be issues with the deal because they were promised so much live TV. But yeah, it's obviously a worry because, you know, if that happened, then in the current situation, WWE could very quickly have massive implications from that. So.
Well, exactly, and I think it's a thing where, because there's a lot of negativity about obviously wrestlers getting fired, and I think I agree with that negativity. I don't think most of these should have got fired. I don't think really anyone should get released. When you read that the Revival got released, you knew they wanted to be fired, or be released, rather. But I don't think anyone who doesn't want to get fired should be fired in the midst of coronavirus going on. For like anyone watching, listening to this, will understand. Sam and I are actors. We do stuff together with Extreme Improv, but we're just actors in general, and all of our industry has gone away as well. So we're much in a similar position to this. But when all of the work that you do goes away, to suddenly think that, well, I've got a long-term contract and to be released feels really bad. But the point I was going to come to here is that, the one thing I can say in the WWE's defense is if there is the risk, and I think they can afford to keep people on, I think they could afford to lose several million unless it's going to upset their stockholders or something. But I think they could afford to eat a few million to keep their talent and everyone who they've signed up. But the risk is that when you go back in time 20 years to when WCW closed down, the company took over WCW and they were going to sell it off. And this was led by a group of investors with Eric Bischoff. And they were going to buy WCW. But the channel that aired WCW suddenly said, we're not going to air it anymore. Which meant that buying the promotion was useless, because there was no Netflix sort of WWE network or YouTube back then. If they didn't have a television channel, owning a wrestling company became pointless.
Yeah.
If WWE would, even though they've got the network, if they would suddenly face that, well, the deal with Fox is going to end, and so now we can't air SmackDown unless we put it on our own network, they might look at the numbers and see that we're not earning enough from the network, and we can't advertise the network if we're not on television anyway. If we lose $1 billion from SmackDown, and however many hundreds of millions of dollars that they'd lose if they suddenly lost Raw or NXT or both, plus the fact that they can't go out and do the shows in Saudi Arabia, which were worth another $1 billion. It could suddenly be that WWE suddenly seeing that they have to take steps to make sure they don't end up the next WCW and just suddenly close down.
Yeah, definitely. It's a worrying time for everybody, and the fact that they're trying to go in as if they are is obviously a good thing, because it is, entertainment. We're both a little bit biased on this, but entertainment is something that is of enormous value to the world. So the fact that they're trying to continue is obviously good. They want to try and do it live as well, which live entertainment is the height of a lot of people's ideologies. So yeah, definitely in that sense, I understand it. And as I said, with a lot of them, it was probably a long time coming. People like Heath Slater and EC3, they were probably going to end up going at some point in the next year. It's kind of kick-started that process a little bit. But it is a worry, the fact that at the end of all of this, they don't have somewhere to go that they know they're going to be at.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a lot of them will end up somewhere. Oh, I think everyone will end up somewhere. I mean, nowadays, even if it's that they just wrestle occasionally on the indies, and then if Kurt Hawkins and Zack Ryder just concentrate on their podcast and do YouTube shows and stuff, there's more opportunity for personalities. What we might see in the next few weeks is that some of these wrestlers might get together and suddenly have their own boneyard match that they're filming, for each other. There's lots of things they could do to increase their value.
Yeah, definitely, and they could also equally do what Cody and the rest of the Elite did and create their own promotion.
Well, do you know what? You basically have a roster here, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, it may not be as big as AEW, but then it obviously could be. I know that people like Joey Ryan and people like that did Chikara, is it? Or
Shikara, yeah.
yeah, it's like a group of 5 or 6 wrestlers that came together and made a promotion that is on the indie scene. So it could be one like that.
Okay,
that
so
they could end up
Joey
doing.
Ryan runs a promotion I think called Bar Wrestling, and
Okay.
there's some statistic where they've got like the most like likes or views or something like this on YouTube compared to a lot of other promotions. But yeah, absolutely, loads of these people can do it. And if you go through this list, it basically is a roster from here. Like, if they were going to like put together and say this is your starting roster, you could look at it and say, well, Anderson and Gallows, they could be our Legion of Doom, they could be our top tag team, and then obviously you've got Kurt Hawkins and Zack Ryder. Zack Ryder could also be a single.
Yeah.
This is just fantasy
and
booking.
Primo.
You've got Mike Chioda as a referee. You have commentary done
And
in
Scott
Spanish.
Armstrong.
Sorry.
And Scott Armstrong as a referee as well.
You know, you've got Spanish commentary, so this would be great in Mexico. But yeah, Rusev, instant world champion.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, you've got a lot of people like Drake Maverick could be pushed up a lot more than he has been. EC3 could finally compete for a world championship. You know, it would be an interesting one. You've also got some female wrestlers there as well. You've got Sarah Logan, Deonna Purrazzo, you know.
But imagine if what you like proposed there actually came to pass, and WWE, like, you know, it was the April 15th bunch. That, like, imagine if they called this promotion April 15th or something like this, or there was just the T-shirt April 15th, and these all came together, and like WWE created their own next line of competition out of this, because they could do it. They could, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, there's enough sort of relatively big names on there who will have made a fair amount of money over the last however many years that could do what Cody and the rest of the elite have done.
All in.
Yeah, essentially, and it creates then a third rival company, or a fourth, I suppose, if you include Impact in that as well. But no, fair enough.
Well, maybe.
But I've read in a lot of places that one of the worst things that WWE did was buy WCW because it meant there was no competition. So I think that competition can bring out the best. So
yeah,
as I say, in the long run, this could be a very good thing for a few different people.
Well, yeah, absolutely. So, you know, if you just like this last perhaps point we'll make, but if you go back and think that, well, if they'd let Cody Rhodes be Cody Rhodes rather than making him Stardust, especially after Dusty Rhodes died, then there would be no All Elite Wrestling right now.
Potentially, yeah. It's one of those strange things to think that one small change in someone's life could have had such a massive impact down the line.
Yeah.
There'd be no natural Dustin Rhodes.
Yeah, true.
He would still be
going... Well, the natural Dustin Rhodes would have been locked back to old WCW tapes from the early 90s.
Well, exactly, yeah. Didn't he like burn his costume or something like that on TV?
What? His Gold Dust costume?
I think very early on, he came out as Gold Dust, and then he went, I am Dustin Rhodes, and then he put it into like this metal bin and set it on fire.
I can't remember that actually, but
and then I think a few weeks later he came back as Gold Dust again.
Okay, wow, Sam. So we've gone through all of this, but I think we should wrap this up here. But we were speaking about doing like a episode to feature just on individual wrestlers, so we could have shows that look at some of the all-time greats like The Rock or Steve Austin, or we could look at individuals or individual shows like Cody or the Young Bucks and people from AEW. We could take a look at like upcoming shows. Like there is going to be a Is it Money in the Bank that's next?
I think so. Yeah, I think that's the one.
Money in the Bank and Double or Nothing. Things will coming up, so we'll be able to take a look at that on future episodes as well. But we will wrap things up here. Sam, where can we find you?
You can find me on Facebook, Sam George Performer. You can also find me on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube at Samuel O. George.
Oh, George. We're going to have to get that on a T-shirt. I like the one thing out of that, Sam, I have to say, because obviously if you're watching this, I'll give a plug in a second. We do Extreme Improv, which I've made sure is still at the top of the stream out there, so just people know that this is connected. Right. But this is like a catchphrase that's come out of it, and And it's because you said that, and a couple of times myself and Dave and Angus, when we were doing like the Radio Rumble shows, we just go, "Oh, George," and it feels wrong not to say it now.
I know, it is one of those things. I did it on one of the stream shows that we did. I did it the wrong way around. I ended on Facebook, and so I kind of had to go like, "Oh, you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube at Samuel O. George," and I had to wait. And then you can also find me on Facebook as well.
Yeah, oh, George. So yeah, you certainly should sort out getting the t-shirts there so people can get the Oh George t-shirts. And I'll come up with some sort of catchphrase for myself, because my catchphrase... This is the whole Leo Rush problem. Leo Rush was upset with WWE because he would say the catchphrase, but then it would be sold as a Bobby Lashley t-shirt. You never actually say the Oh George thing yourself. Everyone else just says it for you.
Well, I'm glad
sell
that
the
it's that rather
t-shirt, it's
than...
your name.
I'm glad it's that rather than Patient Zero that's caught on.
Yeah, do you know what? Like, I really liked that idea, but I felt like that did need to go a little bit into the background.
It got a little bit serious a little bit quick, didn't it?
It did. It'll come back later.
Good.
So for me, my name is David Pustansky, which you can spell Pustansky. This is the Superkick Mania Pro Wrestling Podcast, which has its own Twitter account at Superkick Mania, and it's part of the Extreme Improv Podcast Network. So you can follow Extreme Improv on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Twitch, so on and so forth, just by going to any of those websites. So for example, youtube.com, and then with all of them, it's /Extreme Improv. So, until next time, the last thing I'll say is that later tonight there is going to be, if you're watching this live, there is going to be another Extreme Improv Extremed show, which will be on YouTube, Twitch, and so on and so forth. So check it out there. And we'll have them every week on a Wednesday and a Thursday. Sam's basically on all of them, but maybe just not tonight. But if someone drops out, you'll get a buzz.
Oh, I see. I'm first reserve, am I?
Well, you're basically like the regular on all of them, but just with more people wanting to get in. Like, it's not that I'm saying, well, Sam, you can't do it. Sam actually did say if other people haven't done it yet, that you could step aside, and I appreciate that. But
I'll be the Wayne Brady. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I'll make sure I say the Oh George thing, even if you're not there.
I appreciate that.
Okay, so until next time, everyone, thank you so much. This has been Sam, I've been David, this has been the Superkick Mania Pro Wrestling Podcast, and we are going to end this now. So until next time.
Thanks very much.
Bye for now.
Bye.
10, 9, ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3.
Yeah, definitely. And it's one of those ones where we had to a bit as well, which is quite fun. Yeah, and I really hope that us saying broken freaking neck at the same time on the screen, because on my screen it happened at exactly the same time.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4,
Obviously,
3,
it's
2, 1.
I'm just sorry for the interruption.
Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
But yeah, I'm sure I'll be watching tonight. So yeah, if you need me, let me know. So I assume you've probably got enough things.
9, ignition sequence start.
I'm doing invasion. I come in dressed as DX.
4, 3, 2, 1.
Oh, amazing.
Liftoff.
Just do the impression. Get to the... it was Alan, I think. Well, that's great, because what I'll do, I'll wait until it's live. And then... Yeah.
10,
Keep popping up every now and again.
ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Great fun. What I'll do, I'll be there right at the beginning, and then I'll just drop out. Then I'll come back. Oh no, true, yeah, I have to invade. exactly where it is. So, really.